Control of school curriculum should never be vested in just one body.
And curriculum decisions should especially be vested with the teachers who teach the subject matter.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here is your host and moderator.
Welcome, viewers. Thank you for joining us today for today's program. My name is Andrea Luxton. I am president of Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, and I am the moderator of today's show. I'd like you to meet our other panelists.
Hi, I'm Tom Plumley. I'm the senior minister at First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas. We're a part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ.
Hi, I'm Rabbi Dan Levin. I serve as senior rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
Hi, I'm Carl Troval. I'm professor of ethics and history at Concordia University in Austin, Texas.
And my name is Mel Robeck. I'm an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God, and I've served my church for many, many years at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California, as senior professor of church history and ecumenics, and as special assistant to the president for ecumenical relations.
Thank you very much to our panel. And today we're going to discuss a topic that has become pretty important in the news recently. In Florida, the governor has signed a range of bills into law that tightly define elements of curriculum in public schools and universities, especially as it relates to race and sexual identity. For example, HB 1467 bans controversial topics, and the new civics curriculum with its set of values will take effect in 2024. Hillsdale College, an evangelical college in Michigan, has been central to creating for Florida a curriculum that is, quote, more patriotic, unquote, as well as defining the diversity of opinions allowable at post-secondary level. Action to embed these positions have included teacher training workshops and limitations to libraries on new book selections until librarians are trained about what is being taught. Critics of what is happening in Florida argue that these moves are political and are focused on limiting student access to both important realities of history and legitimate perspectives on race and what it means to see all humanity as equal. Teachers talk about being fearful to teach and that the new regulations are indoctrination. Professors and students are bringing lawsuits to the court, but the state in return claimed that faculty members' curriculum and in-class instruction at public universities is, quote, government speech and, quote, not the speech of the educators themselves. Therefore, such expression is fair game to be regulated by state lawmakers. In light of this conflict, the panelists are asked to consider these questions. Firstly, are you concerned about the involvement of a religiously conservative college in developing the curriculum and controls within the public arena? Secondly, do you see what is happening in Florida as dangerous indoctrination that could undermine values of dignity and equity? And finally, are the actions of the Florida governor and others inevitable reactions to too much liberalization in what is taught in schools and universities? We'll go back to those that began our conversation for the first comments. Bye-bye.
Well, it's good to be with everybody again. I think there's a good reason why in the United States, control of schools is supposed to be a really local decision. And that is because what communities need is not always the same as what another community might need in terms of the desire of what they want to have as the mores and the content of what their public schools teach. And so in a state like Florida, which is a huge state geographically and culturally. You have so many different Floridas in Florida. I know because I live there, right? You have Southeast Florida, which has a more almost northeastern liberal vibe. But you also have a huge conservative component from all of the Latin immigration that has migrated to the Miami area. Then you have Central Florida, which tends to a far more conservative bent in certain places, though not in every place. And then you have North Florida and the Panhandle, which far more represents the kind of culture you might find in the Deep South than you would find necessarily in Miami. And to say there's only one way in Florida that we want to educate our kids in public schools seems to me to be kind of a dangerous thing. The second thing is that I really believe that you should not assign to one body the right and the responsibility of developing curriculum. It should not be the state legislature's responsibility or right to determine what is taught in public schools, or just the teacher's right, or just the governor's right. It should be a conversation between the school board and those who live in a particular community to talk about what is it that we want the content and the curriculum to be in our community, based on the idea that there should be certain state guidelines and there could be certain even national benchmarks that we want to ensure that all children are prepared to meet. I think that I chose very deliberately to send my kids to a Jewish day school, to a private school, because I wanted to ensure that they were taught certain truths in a certain way, and I wanted their religious ideology to be part of their regular school day. I think that what's happened too often is that we have people who want to take their religious mores and they want to impose that on the public school, so that every child is taught those particular religious ideologies. And I think that those are better reserved for the private school system, or for those who wish to the homeschooling system, which has become a far more popular trend among people, especially those with very strong religious beliefs. So I really believe that as we sort of think about what it is that we teach and how we teach it, that's a local decision. The last thing that I would say, and where I think Florida really stepped into an area where they shouldn't have stepped, is that there is a big difference between the secondary school or the primary school system and the university system. The university system is an opt-in system. If I apply for admission to the University of Florida, or Florida State University, or any of the wonderful state schools in Florida or in another place, I've chosen to be there. And it's because I want to hear what the faculty teach. I don't think the governor or anyone should impose their belief on a university professor. I think that's the whole point of the tenure system, and that there should be complete freedom of ideology within the university system.
Thank you.
Well, I agree with that.
I should hope so.
Yes. Well, and I think that the reason why we want to give that freedom, if we want to start with college professors, the reason we want to start there is because these are people who have spent an extensive amount of time trying to learn methodology and look at different ways that, let's say if you're a historian, how different people have looked at different historical events or people or movements or ideas. And they've had the luxury of taking any number of years out of their life to do analysis of texts, whether it could be literary, it could be historical, could be theological, could be philosophical. And I think that in particular, these people, because of their this kind of education and their study that they've made, they do have a certain kind of expertise. And if you ever go to an academic conference, professors are arguing with one another constantly. Like, it never ends. In fact, sometimes it's a little soul-sucking to be at an academic conference, because if someone says A, another person says no, B, and you're missing this, and there's that. So as if it isn't like there's this univocal professorial voice that is indoctrinating all these people in university systems. I agree with you as well on when it comes to local school control and the need to give control to parents as well as teachers, and it needs to be an ongoing conversation about what the needs of the community are. I would fully agree that my wife's been in that educational system a long time. And whenever there's concern about, let's say, material that's being used in the school, usually what would happen is there'd be meetings that would be held between parents and teachers about what's being taught or what's being used. And you're never going to satisfy everyone, but it's got to be a collaborative process. I think, you know, one of the things about studying history, I think, that I really love is that it really cultivates a deep sense of humility, because you're constantly uncovering things you didn't know before, and you realize, man, I can't believe I held that opinion 5 years ago, and now that I know this. And so this is why I hope that all of our teachers everywhere are constantly teaching kids how to think in a humble way as they approach a text or an idea or a people group or a religion or whatever it is. This is deeply needed in our school system.
Thank you. So?
I want to say this is going on in other places besides Florida. You know, Tennessee is thick into it with Governor Bill Lee and his decisions. In South Dakota, Governor Kristi Noem has gone in this direction as well. And I want to ask questions about Hillsdale College and why they get to be the ones who define patriotism, and why this sort of interplay of academic ideas that goes on in academia always is not expressive of the American way. Is that not what we say at the end of every one of these programs? That the American way has to do with the exchange of ideas and the acceptance of each other's wisdom, whether we agree or not. But the exchange is is the good, and to say that there's only one way to look at being an American or being patriotic, and it all is coming out of one little college up in Michigan, right? Michigan. It is just, it doesn't make any sense.
Well,
yeah, I mean, this is an extremely difficult, very complex issue, and part of it has to do with church-state issues, and part of it has to do with parental control versus lack of control. What my child, I think what my child should be taught. Now, you had the privilege, really, of sending your children to a parochial school. I didn't have that. I didn't have the money. And we didn't believe in homeschooling. We felt that the kids could much better benefit in a real-world classroom, and we as parents would try to ameliorate some of the stuff that they got. But that's not always possible, especially for people with 2 and 3 jobs apiece trying to keep home and health and family together. It's just not possible. And there are 2 big issues that we face. There are probably a ton of them. But I mean, I think of sexuality and racism. Those 2 come to the fore all the time. People don't want certain things taught, and especially like kindergartners, 1st grade, 2nd grade. When do we talk about sex, and how do we talk about sex, and who has the right to talk about sex? Is it the government? Is it the loudest voice? Is it the politician? Is it the school board? Where does a family come in? Where does the parent right come in on that? Or if you look at racism, you know, I mean, racism starts at the cradle. You know, we teach everybody about racism. We do that, and we do it often unconsciously, and we should be challenged, and we should be challenged on the sexuality issue as well. But at what level? When? Who gets to do that? And what does it look like when it's done? When we as a family would disagree with where the other parties are going. What do we do about that? And I think, you know, the collaboration idea, the community idea is absolutely essential. And I'm totally agreed with you that tenure was invented to keep professors and teachers safe from the political realities around them, that we're trying to push them in this direction or that direction or another direction or whatever. We want some truth taught here, and we don't need people who are amateurs in this truth to be giving the truth as they understand it or idealize it in their own ideology, and set aside the people who have trained in the field and understand the realities that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I think it really needs to come back to community control and a lot more say by parents for their own children.
I would add, though, one thing that I think we as a society have failed at, which is we forgot what it actually means to raise resilient children. And we are under this delusion that good parents ensure that their children are never uncomfortable. And God forbid a child should be exposed to an idea that is difficult or where they have to wrestle with something that is uncomfortable. The fact is that growth comes from tackling things that are hard. Yes. And we somehow have gotten to the idea that our children should never be exposed to an idea that makes them feel bad. Feeling bad is fine. Yeah. When I was going through math, and I'm a rabbi for a reason, and that's because all the math genes were taken by my two older sisters, one of whom is a professor of math education, the other who's an electrical engineer. By the time they got to me, the cupboard was bare in terms of math ability, right? And so math was always a struggle for me. I had to work hard at it. And I remember in grade school nights there were tears because I couldn't get it. Yep. And then there was the amazing joy when I finally got an A on a math test because it was hard. And I learned, you know what? If I work hard at something, even something I'm not good at, I can still succeed. And I think that we can do better as a society if we teach that resilience comes from dealing with things that are discomfortable or that are disappointing. And when we ask our children to confront issues around race or to confront issues around sexuality, and we don't shy away from those things, and instead of saying you shouldn't have to hear that, or you shouldn't be allowed to read that, or you should never be exposed to that, to say, okay, let's talk about that. That's hard. That's uncomfortable. What do you want to do with it? We can become better parents, and we can become and create better citizens and better students.
I also think that I think wise teachers know how to address this in good ways. And for instance, in Texas, where you're not supposed to be teaching about critical race theory, I know one of my friends, he's a history teacher, and I said, how are you going to handle that? And he says, well, first we're going to read the bill that was passed by the legislature that forbids us to talk about it, or for me to teach about it. And he said, then they're all going to ask this, well, what's critical race theory? Right? Because that's what's mentioned in the bill. The thing is that if you're an educator and you give people the primary documents, it's going to lead you to certain conclusions. And that's why I also think to try to control that is virtually impossible, particularly for wise teachers.
Yeah. I think it's ironic that this effort, this movement began out of a feeling that education had become politicized. So what did they do but impose a political ideology or put political ideologues in charge of creating the curriculum? That just doesn't make any sense.
Yep.
I know the whole creation evolution controversy, right?
Yeah.
I just remember how that was handled in my school because I knew my biology teacher was a creationist. Well, he said, well, let's look at all the arguments in favor of evolution and against evolution, in favor of creation and against creation. And I remember as a junior, I thought, well, that's a pretty fair way to deal with it. We just went through all the different arguments. And he says, you can believe what you go talk to your parents or whatever you want to, you decide. And I thought, doggone it, that's a good way to teach it rather than being...
That's true, but let's take the issue of sexuality in first and second graders. Are they capable of understanding the pros and the cons? Yeah. Are they capable yet?
But I think the question is anybody actually teaching that to first and second graders? And the answer is, this is a bill, a law, and I'm not sure that is such a widespread phenomenon.
All right. Well, I'm going to have a chance to talk a little bit later because this one to me is really important as an educationalist. And I think some of what we're talking about is a very unique U.S. situation because of the way that we have control of our education system. But more of that later. But now let's take a break.
We hope you're enjoying today's program. If you'd like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the vision and history of the program, and we invite you to become a ministry partner, explore our Town Hall Estates healthcare facilities, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, we look forward to receiving your letters. You may write us at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. If you have a prayer request, please send it to prayerrequest@americanreligious.org. Thank you for writing and thank you for watching. Now, back to today's closing statements.
Welcome back to a topic that's caused a lot of interest today, and we're going to hear the closing comments. Tom.
Thank you. I was talking about our ironies a while ago. I think it's ironic also that we want good, highly educated teachers to be experts in how to make our kids well-educated people. And then we tell the parents with the loudest voices that they are in charge, which usually means that some influencer from outside that is not an educator has really become the one that's in charge. I find that terribly ironic, insulting to our teachers, and we need to give them the power to educate kids like they've been taught to do. All you educators here on the panel.
The topic is so interesting because it is true that wherever you stand, you have to realize you have blind spots. So that everyone has their ideology that they have, but it's about being open and honest about what that is, and then giving other people the opportunity to express those opinions and to give them a fair way of making sure that their opinions and ideas are heard, so that in this thing, all these ideas, that everyone can hear these diverse perspectives and draw conclusions on their own. And I mean, to me, that's always been what the purpose of education is. And I always hated those profs who this is the way you have to do it, right? To me, it just went right against what I thought education was. And all I know is I'm very grateful for my education because I felt that I had that opportunity at every stage of my education.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, I think on the whole I am as well. Like Dan, I didn't do very well in math. I have to say I really struggled with it. But the reality is there were teachers that were trying to teach me, and I was just a poor learner when it came to that. But I do think, and I absolutely come back to this idea, that it is a community endeavor, and we need to learn how to trust one another and quit calling each other names. Jesus has this wonderful little saying, before you take the mote out of somebody else's eye, you take the log out of your own. And it's absolutely right. We all have logs in our eyes, and it makes it difficult for us to teach or to learn. I just wish that we could have a fairer accounting of the way things are taught and what is taught and at what ages things are taught, so that there is a real graded curriculum that makes sense to all of us. I don't know if you can get that in the U.S., but that's what I'd like.
I think part of the reason why I love participating in the American Religious Town Hall is because it teaches that appreciation comes from understanding complexity. Yeah. For my daughter's birthday, she's at school in Washington, D.C. for college. She wanted to go visit Mount Vernon. And if you go visit Mount Vernon, they are very clear and upfront about the fact that George Washington and Martha owned a lot of slaves, 317 between them. And in the tour that we took of Mount Vernon, they talked about how complex it was and how George Washington and Martha wrestled with the fact that they owned human beings and that there were so many enslaved persons that were on their plantation, and how complex it was to free them, which they ultimately decided to do over time. And I didn't lose any respect for George Washington as the first president and the father of our nation by virtue of the fact that he owned 317 enslaved persons. I actually grew an appreciation for him because they helped me appreciate the complexity of what that was at its time. And I think that the more that we expose kids to difficult and complex ideas, the better educated and the better citizens they will be. I was talking to a school principal in Florida. There's a mandate in our county that they teach elements of the Holocaust. And every year when they do a program on the Holocaust, there's parents that say, I don't want my kids to go to that program. And they say, well, why not? We say, well, it's going to give them bad dreams. It's going to disturb them. Right. Yes, and one of the things we need to learn is we can have bad dreams and we can hit disturbing ideas and we can be okay. And we can be stronger because of our experience of discomfort. That's where the real growth will be.
Thank you very much. Great conversation. 2 quick comments from my perspective as an educator. First of all, I grew up in the UK, and there they have a national curriculum like many, many countries. And that is put together by professionals over a period of years to identify age-appropriate outcomes that you expect from people. I don't think that's ever going to happen in the United States just because of the way that the United States works. But I think it does set some principles about putting the right people around the table who really have the expertise and understanding. And to me, that is often the teachers. The teachers are professionals. And I think sometimes when people who are not educators think they can tell the educators what to do, it's really like telling an engineer, you don't know what you're talking about, do this. So I really think we need to respect the fact that educators have a huge amount to bring to the table. We need to be careful not to diminish or demean their capacity to understand the needs of the students of different ages. The Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory but in reality. And so now, friends, until next week, at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.